What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome back to America Trends. I'm Larry Rifkin, along with my buddy, my constant companion, John Kropsic.
How you doing?
John, I'm good.
You look
really
good.
am.
You look
I
really healthy and good. Yes.
I took a little nap.
Oh, well, that helped. I should have done that.
I'll tell you, sleep is such an important part of our daily existence. I think sleep was underrated.
Sleep and water. Sleep and water. Those are the two things we need that we don't get enough of.
My wife, you don't hydrate enough.
Exactly.
And so I may go with...
Same with my wife.
I know. I may go with an intravenous drip. Maybe that's the only way to do it. No, but seriously, sleep, it's getting a lot of attention because a lot of people are sleep deprived. A lot of people are very anxious these days. They're worried about their job. They're worried about money. They're worried about the world. And they're anxious, so they're not sleeping well.
Right. Well, we're bombarded 24/7 with bad news.
Everybody's watching the news constantly.
That's why I stopped watching the
I know.
news.
That's a good antidote. Maybe just go to sleep. And of course, John, in our society, whenever there is something that we determine we need more of, then there are a lot of products that become associated with it. And now I'm thinking about My Pillow. I'm thinking about 1-800 mattress or all of these different things.
New beds in a box. You see that?
Yeah, and they're so technologically advanced, and they will arrive with the curvature of your spine perfectly imprinted, and then your partner will never get over on your side because there's some kind of wall or barrier they put up or whatever it is. But you can tell whenever something like this is going on, that if there are a lot of products that come out to respond to it, then it's a real phenomenon. But of course, there are a lot of people who can't sleep well because they've got chronic conditions. They've got all kinds of muscular problems, and they really feel uncomfortable sleeping.
Wow. What are we going to do about that, Larry?
I don't know what we're going to do about that. But I'm leading us to a point in this podcast that's slow in developing, friends. I recognize that. But it's about doctors and about whether we can be our own best doctor. And I really do believe that we are our own best doctor. And I say that because, John, no doctor can follow you around 24/7. No doctor can say, don't order a Big Mac. No doctor can say, take your pills on the right schedule because you're home alone.
Food is really our medicine, but we don't take our medicine properly.
Well, the doctor who's been in the news lately, Dr. Ronnie Jackson, who said that Donald Trump could live to 200 if he just ate better. Evidently, he's a horrible eater, eats a lot of junk food. So obviously, he's not going to live to 200 eating Big Macs all day and drinking 12 Diet Cokes. So we've got to be honest that we've got to be our own best doctors. Having said that, we want really good doctors, don't we?
We do. We want the best doctors.
And the problem that we're having in the United States of America right now, that is a new trend in America, and that's why you're going to be hearing it on America Trends podcast. The U.S. is facing a massive doctor shortage.
Well, I sort of understand that. Doctors are being owned by now the hospitals, and they're like on a treadmill. They don't do. I'm mad at my doctor because they won't come to the hospital and see you if you're sick. They send a proxy doctor to see.
Well, they're called a hospitalist.
Yes. Well, whatever it is, he doesn't know me.
Right. And so you got to start all over again. We know the transferability of information with the electronic medical record isn't quite as good as they tell us. And I don't really know whether this is really caused by the fact that, maybe we don't have enough schools training primary doctors or GPs or internists, whether specialties are really going to be affected. But we're looking out to 2030, and there is this notice as a lot of people are looking at this. Because don't forget, John, you can't make a doctor overnight.
No, you can't. And and here the cost must be phenomenal to become a doctor.
Oh,
And
absolutely. Think about that. And I mean, we do see a lot of foreign-born doctors, and you wonder about some of the things that have been going on relative to immigration and whether we're welcoming as many people as we need to. And then we look at all these other complementary areas like PAs and
APRNs.
ARPNs, and is that
Yeah,
what, APRNs?
APRNs. Yeah.
Yeah. Why do I say ARPNs?
Well, I don't know.
I don't know. Gotta check that. So we're going to check in with Dr. Elaina George, who has been on with us on several occasions and gotten a lot of attention. One of her podcasts about the fact that America's life expectancy has been decreasing, and that's not a good sign. She wants to weigh in on this issue of why we're looking at a tremendous doctor shortage. And she has some ideas that may not be apparent to you as to the reasoning.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing is I think the insurance companies play doctor more than the doctors play doctor, really.
Well, I know in this podcast we get into that, and there are doctors at these insurance companies, and they wave a magic wand, and they say, no, that condition goes away because we're not going to treat it. We're not going to pay for it. So you're just going to have to kind of suck it up and
Suck
deal
it
with
up,
it.
buddy.
Yeah, right. That's the new prescription. There, let me write that down. But anyway, we do prescribe that you listen to the next
Definitely.
about half an hour because if you're concerned, and we all are, I mean, doctors are just an important part of every community. We take it for granted that there's going to be somebody around us who knows what rheumatology is or what urology is. But let's not take it for granted. And let's not take for granted that this shortage is not going to meet us at our front door. And the next time you see a doctor is going to be over a computer screen getting telemedicine.
Yeah, that's coming.
I know, absolutely. Or maybe a robot will be our next doctor.
Wow, that's spooky. That is creepy, kind of.
Dr. Spooky to you. All right. We will listen to Dr. Elaina George on this episode of America Trend. Dr. Elaina George, the author of Big Medicine, The Cost of Corporate Control and How Doctors and Patients Working Together Can Rebuild a Better System. We've got a problem, Dr. George, you're telling us, and a lot of the statistical analysis suggesting that we're going to have a massive doctor shortage. Why is that?
There's a lot of reasons. One of the hallmarks of our healthcare system is the government insertion into the training of our doctors, specifically the residents. After a doctor finishes medical school, they go through their training, they try to match in a residency program for whatever the specialty is. The government actually has decreased the number of residency spots. So there's 50,000 doctors, medical students, certified, and they can't find a residency spot. And if you don't have a residency spot, you cannot practice medicine. So this is an artificial lack of manpower and womanpower in the medical field. And the government could fix that if they would take their finger off the scale and allow more residency spots to open up. If you add in people coming in from other countries to enter the residency programs, that's another reason why American-trained or U.S.-trained physicians are not getting spots and actually don't work. And those are things you can actually correct.
How do we correct this whole issue of the residencies? In other words, if it were a free market or open system, how would that work?
Well, you would have doctors going to areas of the country that don't have physicians. And if you took the government and the insurance control over how much physicians are paid, you would actually have people going into primary care, family practice, other general medical specialties that would actually help people in rural areas. So this is actually a response to the government insertion. Then you add in what it's like to be a doctor and the fact that the autonomy is gone, that the hospitals, the insurance companies are literally practicing medicine unmolested. There's no consequence for it. Then you add that into the emotional side of it. That's why you're seeing doctors leave the profession in droves, or worse yet, not coming into it.
Okay, so what is the bigger problem? People not coming into medicine or people wanting to get out of it once they've been in it?
It's both. It's both. I mean, I'm an ear, nose, and throat doctor. It took me 6 years to train to be an ENT, plus 4 years of medical school. That's a long time to train. If you leave, I'm at the height of my practicing now. I've been out for about 17 years. And if I leave and retire, that's a lot of knowledge that leaves patient care. And we're seeing doctors leave in their 50s, in their 60s. This is the prime time of your medical practice. And you're either leaving, committing suicide, or selling your practice to a hospital where you no longer have autonomy and you are literally going to do what the whim of the hospital tells you to do if you want to have a job. Then you're seeing that pressure being exerted.
We'll return to this episode of America Trends in just a moment. If you like what we're doing here at America Trends Podcast, please don't keep it to yourself. I know there are a lot of people, John, who think, well, if I'm listening and somebody else wants to listen at the same time, maybe we're going to collide and they're not going to be able to hear us.
Yeah.
Is that the way the technology works?
No, there's plenty of bandwidth. Everybody can listen at the same time.
All right. Well, that
sure
dispels that myth. Now, you can do a number of things that would really be helpful to us. You could give us a kind rating or a review at Apple Podcasts, and that boosts what they consider to be our value and visibility. And what does that do, John?
Well, that puts us in the forefront so that you can find us easier, and most important is other people can find us easier.
And you can subscribe there or on our site, americatrendspodcast.com, or wherever you're listening, so we can alert you to new episodes of the podcast, which, by the way, we put out twice a week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Or you can like us on Facebook or follow us where, John?
On Twitter.
On Twitter. That's right, where the world turns to hear fake news or whatever it is. Well, you can direct message us at Trends Podcast or using hashtag Trends Podcast. And you know, John, with our growing audience, and really it's been pretty remarkable, a lot of people just came to us the last month or two, and they might have missed earlier episodes. Can they get them again?
They can look through them and pick the ones they want to listen to. They're all on the website, and a lot of them are up on iTunes, many of them.
All right. Well, listen, there's lots of material to listen to. We hope you have the time, and will lend it to us because we try to make it worth your while. And thanks so much for listening.
And tell your friends.
We now return to this episode of America Trends. And we just can't manufacture doctors. As you say, this is a long process. Do you think the process is too long?
No, I mean, you know how much we have to learn to be a physician. It's a lifelong learning experience. It does take that much time to learn how to treat patients. If you're a surgeon, if you're a specialist, it takes a very long time. It's not an easy thing. And that's why algorithms are a problem. Right now, everybody's on the bandwagon. You have people from Wall Street, opening up little doc-in-the-boxes and treating with artificial intelligence as if it's easy and you can just plug it in. That's not how medicine works. And I think patients really need to be educated that it's not one size fits all. That if you know that the drug companies do research on particular medications, but their patient base doesn't include African Americans, doesn't include children in some instances, doesn't include women in other instances, that all these medicines don't actually work for everybody. These are things that are subtle that you really will have to learn and train to know the difference of. And I just don't think a conveyor belt style of medicine is the way to go.
Now, the Association of American Medical Colleges tells us that we are facing this looming shortage of between 40,800 and 104,000 physicians by 2030. Do you think we're looking more at the higher end of that scale or the lower end, or how do we even know?
I'm not sure that we do know, but I can say that if we're going on the same trajectory that we're on now, there will be a problem in terms of patients accessing a doctor. And we've already seen that. We're seeing allied healthcare professionals really becoming the front line of care. So I've had patients tell me that they've never seen their physician. They've only been taken care of by a nurse practitioner or a physician assistant. We're talking about neurologists and infectious disease. We're talking about specialists. So we've already seen a changing of the manpower in the healthcare system. But I have to say, I think most of that pressure is being driven by changes brought on by the Affordable Care Act, because it was never about taking care of patients. It was always about control and about the hospitals and the corporate interests getting as much money as they could from a workforce. And if you really think about this, if you have to pay your workforce less money, you get to pocket the difference, don't you? And that's really what's driving a lot of this. It's money. It's not patient care.
But even through the devolution, let's say, of the Affordable Care Act, however it's being deconstructed, do you see any of the changes that you're talking about that are necessary to get the doctor back in the center of action?
The only way that I see it working is the independent doctor removing themselves from the system and creating a parallel system that's based on the patient being a consumer, where there's price transparency, where you know what the cost is before you walk in that doctor's office, and it's the doctor and the patient deciding on the course of treatment, not the whim of the pre-certification via the insurance company or the government. That's the antidote to this. It's not centralization. It's not the government having more control or trying to pick winners or losers. It's patients actually knowing what the real value of a service is and being able to make a conscious choice. And that only, I think, was going to come around if the patients know they have an alternative and they start using it.
But let me use as an example, I'm a baby boomer, and we're going into the Medicare system now, and that's anything but what you're talking about. First of all, it's not single payer. It certainly has all the insurance companies and the government. It's got all the things that you're talking about. So, I mean, there's just no movement back to what it is that you're talking about. And I think about that back in the 1950s when we went to the doctor and gave him $10, and that was it.
Well, actually, if you're savvy and you're going into Medicare, you actually have a way around the Medicare system.
How so?
Medical cost sharing. Medical cost sharing is a perfect example. These are groups of patients across the country who've joined together to create their own payment system. I belong to one called Liberty Health Share, and I pay a monthly fee or a shared amount, $199, and I share that with thousands of people across the country. And when I need a health care service done, I go and get it done, and I get reimbursed back from my other members. So it's self-pay patients who have managed to increase their buying power, access the healthcare system by not using the insurance card, which is much cheaper, and then you can actually do what you want. If you want to have a procedure done, you're not asking for permission. If it's medically necessary, you get it done. And Medicare patients can use this type of system as a supplemental policy so that when their Medicare says no, they can go around them and do that. Or you can use supplemental policies like AFLAC, which provides, it's not insurance, but it covers you for a medical condition. If you have a heart attack, stroke, if you get admitted to a hospital, you're buying a prepaid policy that will literally pay you if you get diagnosed with these things. And I'm paying my office staff, I cover them with that same AFLAC policy, and they're paying about $50 a month, but they're covered up to $250,000 per incident if they ever get diagnosed with a catastrophic illness. That's how you play the game, okay? You take your power back and you control your pocketbook, not some insurance company who could care less about whether you live or die.
What percentage of the American public has begun thinking this way?
It's growing. Liberty Health Share went from, I think, 10,000 members, and it's over 100,000 easy, almost 200,000 now in the last 3 or 4 years since the Affordable Care Act really kicked in. And there's MediShare and there's Samaritan. It's a growing number. And now there are doctors like myself who offer a cash-based side to their practice. So patients can, if they don't have insurance or they have this huge deductible, we can make a deal with each other. The hospitals actually do it. If you go anywhere in this country and you say, I'm going to pay you cash, what deal can you cut me? Everybody will cut you a deal, whether it's a hospital, whether it's an independent doctor. And that's what patients need to know.
Let me get back to this doctor shortage, if you will. Is it going to be in the area of primary medicine? I know in the state of Connecticut, there was a new school put online just for primary care physicians. Are we really talking about, or do we know within that set of doctors that we're losing, whether in fact the specialties are affected like yours, ENT, or is it more primary care?
It's across the board. I think that's what... we've had a media blitz on the primary care doctors being the focal point of the doctor shortage, but everybody is important. If you go to a primary care doctor and you can't see a neurologist or an endocrinologist, you're still out of luck. And everybody is affected by this. We have waiting lists to see specialists. We have waiting lists to see primary care doctors, this is not a good system. But if you really think about this, who stands to gain? And you take a step back from all the rhetoric. Ultimately, the system needs to change by driving a crisis. And you create a crisis and you can make the system do what you want it to do. What is that? You never let a good crisis go to waste. People have said that, right? Mm-hmm. Well, they want single payer. And single payer is the way that the government expands Medicare. It takes your money in terms of Obamacare, where you're paying fines and you're paying into a system. And it's a public-private partnership where, and I foresee this happening, Medicare Advantage type of system where the insurance companies are the administrators of this huge plan. It doesn't work. Medicare and Medicaid don't work. Imagine triple or quadrupling that to everybody in the country. It's not a good system.
When we look at this doctor shortage that we're talking about, is it already well underway in our smaller communities, our rural communities? And explain that to us.
This started when the Affordable Care Act went online, and the rural hospitals and the community hospitals were the first to get devastated when the money started to be pulled out of the hospitals, paying for people who don't have the means to pay. As soon as that dried up, those community hospitals and rural hospitals closed. Those were the first people to be dinged. And I think everybody has noticed that hospital systems have grown up in their community, where there's one huge hospital, maybe two, and dozens of satellite centers. It sounds good for the most part, but what it's done is it's made people have to travel from rural areas into the city, hundreds of miles in some instances, to get care. That's not helping somebody if they need care within 5 or 10 minutes, is it? And ultimately, it's actually decreasing the access to care. And I think that's why we're seeing the growth of telemedicine, to try to compensate for that.
And I want to get into that, but I do want to ask you about the foreign-born doctors and what role they play in all of this. I think many of us who've been to a hospital lately, we see many doctors who are not from the United States. Mm-hmm. There was this H-1B fast-tracking review if you paid an extra $1,225. Mm-hmm. Explain what's going on in that regard.
It's about cheap labor, and it's about being paid. Some of these residency programs actually get money by taking in a foreign medical student when you don't get that from a U.S.-born medical student, so it's a money-making venture. Then you have hospitals who are trying to fill their workforce, and if you have somebody who's going to work for a lesser amount, you're actually going to make more money. And I think we're now seeing an actual change from that as well. So we're moving from MDs to PAs and nurse practitioners, because it's all about, getting the best bang for your buck as a hospital. So I don't know if the H-1B visa program is going to be as robust as it has been, because they're looking for the next big thing, the next cheaper labor member to take up the slack.
What are we losing when we're seen by a PA or an ARPN? Because or APRN, I will tell you that a lot of people think that they're often given a lot more attention by those professionals than they are the doctors, but perhaps that's part of the problem we have.
Well, we don't train the same way. As I said, it took me 10 years to become an ear, nose, and throat doctor. It takes a PA 2 or 3 years to be a PA. They're not equal. 6 years of just surgical training alone does not equate. It can't. Same thing with nursing. They have nursing programs that are actually just online. Even the workforce of the nursing population has changed. A registered nurse did a lot more hands-on clinical. Now it's more, web-based. So from my standpoint, we all have a role. There is no somebody better than the other, but we all do different things. And I think this group approach where everybody's part of a team and everybody's got this one little niche that they do, that's not really the answer. And it actually costs more money, because you have people who actually practice medicine using an algorithm. For example, if you walk into a hospital now, you get a boatload of tests standard just by coming into the hospital. You get treated for a staph infection, resistant staph infection. You get cultured. You get put on insulin. You get vaccines that you may not need. This is all based on an algorithm-driven system. You know how much money that costs, as opposed to thinking about whether the patient actually needs all of those services? This is how the system is now working. It's working almost automated. and it's not for everybody. They're calling consults, and I've been party to this, where I got called for a consult to take out earwax when the person didn't even have an otoscope to look in the ear. So that cost the patient money to call the ENT consult, but the hospital made money on the consult. These are the things that people don't get a feel for, but once they're in it, they have no idea until they get socked with a bill, and that's unacceptable.
The Association of American Medical Colleges is looking at a multi-pronged solution to the impending doctor shortage. And one of the things they're encouraging is telemedicine, as you just suggested earlier, and team-based care. Are those two approaches that you recommend?
No, actually, I'm old school. I believe in taking care of the patient face-to-face, examining the patient. There are times when, if you live in a rural area and you don't have a specialist, it's totally appropriate. Indian reservation, for example, perfect example of actually having a telemedicine base to your approach. But we're talking about telemedicine in the midst of a city where you have a senior citizen who then, gets treated remotely, never sees the doctor because it's cheaper for the hospital. Imagine, you can actually bill for something, but you're not using any of your own equipment. You don't use sutures, you don't use any kind of equipment for the patient to come into the brick and mortar, but you still get to bill. This is remote medicine, and it may not work for everybody. Not everybody's the same. And what looks like a simple thing is not when you start actually seeing the patient and laying hands on the patient. So I don't believe that this should be the standard of care. I think it should be an adjunct.
When we look at the Association of American Medical Colleges, I'm not certain what their political heft is and their impact. We've been hearing in the recent news accounts about different groups that are really pressure-laden, and they are effective in what they do. So I'm not certain whether any of the recommendations are going to be accepted. But the other one, of course, deals with what we talked about at the beginning, the number of residency positions, lifting the cap on these federally funded residency training programs. Do you see them having an impact in that regard?
I think that would be the fastest way to help the physician shortage, because you already have people who've been trained but just don't have the space to actually complete their training. So they've completed medical school, they've passed their boards, they're eligible, they're already licensed to practice medicine, but they have no training program to complete. Those are the first people who should be online to actually enter the system again, because they've already spent the money. They've already spent the time training. They know what they're doing. They're good doctors, and they would actually add to the system. And I read an article where one of them said that she would love the opportunity to be able to go to the rural areas, and those are the exact patients she'd want to treat. Now, you have a whole group of people. Imagine that template where you're using people who have been out of the system, love what they do, would be honored to actually go and help people on the fringe, whether that be economically, socially, whatever. That's going to help our system, not automating it and making more AI. That's not the answer.
Do you think it's a crying shame that so many of the people in your profession, and we all admire you and look up to you, that in fact they're getting out as quickly as they are? Would that be a good quick fix if we could take some of your issues and concerns more seriously and begin to address them?
Absolutely. But I want to be on the record as saying my concerns are my patient's concerns. I'm concerned when I have to get a pre-certification for a procedure and the insurance company slow walks it, denies it, and the patient has a bad outcome because the insurance company wouldn't pay for it. These are the things that doctors actually want. It's not money. It's the ability to have the middleman removed from our patient care. Somebody who has a fiduciary responsibility that's at odds with the patient should not have the final word on a healthcare system, on a choice or a decision in our healthcare. That's a conflict of interest. If they would clean that up, if they would let doctors and patients do what they do, which is for us to be our patient's advocate, for our patients to be able to trust us and have time to spend with us, the system would run better, it would be cheaper, and there would be better outcomes. And that's from the patient and doctor side, not these other ancillary insertions.
How scandalous do you see it when we learn that Aetna, for example, for a period of time, that their physician who's supposed to oversee what it is that's being requested and give approval based on sound medical practice is not even looking at the cases?
Not surprised. They're being paid by the insurance company to deny to deny procedures, to deny care. That's what they're there for. That's a conflict of interest as well. So you shouldn't have the person who's paid by the insurance company be the final arbiter of requested medical service. Conflict of interest, they're being paid by them. It's in their interest to say no, and they do 24/7. And what people don't know is that if they say no, the physician is still liable for the care of that patient. If there's a bad outcome, the doctor gets sued, even though the insurance company denied the care. That is a completely uneven, unequal system, and that's one of the reasons that you're losing doctors in droves.
Dr. Elaina George, thank you for staying in the profession and for being with us today on America Trends.
It's my pleasure. If people want to reach me, they can go to my website, drelainageorge.com, and I have a radio show, Medicine on Call, on Wednesday mornings at America's Web Radio, 9 to 10 a.m.